Have a good day.
Thank you, you too.
Alright, this is hands down the most emotional baby I've ever seen in my life. His brother and sister just left for school, and this is his honest reaction. He's not just upset, he's upset that he's upset. So what does he do? Slaps himself in the face. This is an outward expression of what he's feeling on the inside. People ask me why I didn't laugh. Because I was scared. This is none other than the evil villain's origin story.
Hi guys, welcome to 2021. We are 420 somewhere and we're going to talk about smartphones and fentanyl. So quick story before we get into the main story today. There was a study published in a peer-reviewed journal. The journal is called Drug and Alcohol Dependence. And the meat of the study is trying to figure out if smartphones themselves using the accelerator in the actual smartphone and GPS and a few other things that I don't really understand, if they can use those things to tell if the user is high or intoxicated with marijuana. Right off the bat is kind of a worrisome thing, and I think a lot of people will have a problem with that idea of smartphones being able to tell when you're high. They have also done a similar study with alcohol, so these studies are actually really accurate. They say it's about 90% accurate with its predictions of whether or not you're high. And the question is, what would this even be for? Like, why would you want this? And I would assume that it wouldn't be for people to put on their phone involuntarily because the amount of overreach that the phone is doing there is just so intense that so many people would opt out and would not want anything to do with that. But say you, when you get too high or when you get too drunk or whatever, and you don't really trust your own decisions and you get behind a wheel or something, so you kind of use this app and it will make sure. This is very high tech, but if your phone is connected to your car and then your car doesn't allow you to move when you are too high or too drunk to function on the car. Again, I don't think a whole lot of people would even want to do that because of the amount of power that your phone would have, the amount of power that your car would have. So I don't see it really going anywhere, but it's fascinating that a phone can actually even do that just by using GPS and the accelerator within the phone. I would assume it takes time. Over time, it starts to see your patterns, and you would have to tell it when you're high and be like, okay, so this is how they act, or this is where they go when they're high, and then create patterns off of that. It's fascinating, if anything, and I hope it doesn't ever come to light. Okay, main story. We had done a really quick little segment on a scare where some fentanyl was found potentially in marijuana edibles in the suburbs of Philadelphia. Here's a clip of me saying this.
In Philadelphia, the suburbs of Philadelphia, there was a few edibles that were found to have been laced with fentanyl.
That was a little more than a week ago, and it turns out that story was more fear-mongering than anything else, and I don't think there's really any basis to it, so we're kind of taking that back and saying that story was mainly fabricated by just some health warnings in the area where public officials were sending out emails and saying, watch out, we have had reports of students and other people overdosing on marijuana. And the first thing their mind is, before there was even any kind of trace or scientific evidence, they thought that it could have been fentanyl. There were 3 students in particular who went to the hospital off of an overdose of marijuana, or they probably just took too many edibles, and they found no fentanyl in their systems. So that entire thing was blown out of proportion, and it seems like this is something that has happened in the past. I did some research and found that there are multiple articles, or one specifically from Forbes, that talks about this same thing, where there have been reports of fentanyl in marijuana, yet there have never been any substantial evidence showing that there has been fentanyl in marijuana. There are things from the health department of Santa Cruz saying that yes, fentanyl has been found, but again, no sources. It's understandable because we're all rather afraid of what fentanyl can do and the power and the potency that fentanyl has. And as a review, fentanyl is 50 times stronger than heroin. So when there's just a little bit too much fentanyl in heroin, people tend to overdose off of that, and it can be fatal. most often is fatal, and it's becoming more and more prevalent. We were initially seeing it in heroin, now we're seeing it more in MDMA and ketamine and things like that, more partier drugs, cocaine. So it's nerve-wracking, the prevalency of fentanyl in a lot of these places that we thought were safe, and really anything illicit now is become a target and become a possible thing to be laced with fentanyl. So that's, I think, why people thought, marijuana could easily be that, because it's one of the most, probably the most bought illicit drug out there in the market. Yet there has not been any evidence yet for an actual case happening. No one has actually seen a marijuana edible, a gummy or whatever, and found fentanyl in that gummy. So again, it's understandable, but we need to be careful because we don't want this to create any policies. The last thing you want is fear to get the best of any kind of policy making and create things out of just complete thin air. And that's what could potentially happen when stories like this are spread. And we were part of that spreading, so sorry about that. We will make sure that there is evidence before we put out any fentanyl stories, especially. Speaking on the subject, I guess we could talk about one more. A huge bust happened in California a couple days ago with car fentanyl. And I said fentanyl is 50 times stronger than heroin. Car fentanyl is 100 times stronger than fentanyl. It's crazy the amount of power that's in this little white substance here. The small nanomillimeter or nanometer or whatever they call it that you need in order for it to be a lethal dose is so tiny that the point of this thing is it's an elephant tranquilizer. So the fact that this would be showing up in huge numbers, there was 21 kilograms of the stuff at this one apartment. The two people living at the apartment were arrested. It was a gigantic bust. They said that this amount of car fentanyl had the potential to kill 50 million people. The so-called reasoning behind fentanyl so far has been that you could put less heroin in the things that people would buy, and they would be hooked for a higher tolerance and start to need more. It's still a slimy thing to do, of course, but there was a reasoning behind it. But when it comes to car fentanyl, I don't see the reason behind it unless it's an extreme small amount, but it's just so dangerous because you could easily put way more, or you could easily put just a little bit more, and that would be lethal. So it's strange that that's even showing up in places like this, but it is just such a huge, obscene amount. Yeah, so we're just going to end it on fentanyl because we got that story incorrect, and we wanted to talk about how powerful this thing is while also not having touched marijuana, at least. So that's a good thing, and if you want to be super sure, just don't buy from the illicit market. In many states now, you can just go to a pot shop, just get weed there, and you'll be fine. There will be no fentanyl in there. Okay, that's it for Wednesday. We'll be back on Friday with more stories. I'll see you then.
Yo, bro, had the best party last night. Some sucker left their vape here. Whoa!